Hello and welcome to Sports Mole's Football Shorts. I'm Barney Corkhill. I'm here with our football editor Matt Law, and we're here to discuss our Week 3 predictions for the Premier League season. Week 2 was a record-breaking week in terms of goals, the highest scoring game we've ever seen in the Premier League. And at the end of it all, me and Matt are level pegging on the prediction competition as 20 all after 2 weeks, so still all to play for and obviously a long way to go. So we'll get straight into week 3, and the first game, Matt, is Brighton versus Manchester United. I noticed you're not wearing your United kit this week after their defeat to Crystal Palace on the opening day, but that was a poor result, wasn't it? How do you see this one going against Brighton?
Yeah, it wasn't ideal, was it? The game was. It's. I think the VAR call obviously was ridiculous for the penalties. I won't really get started on that because I don't think we've got the time. But yeah, the result itself, the performance, I think in general wasn't good enough. Like they were so poor in the first half, the way they moved the ball. You know, Rashford, Martial all struggled. James struggled. I can understand to a certain extent why Greenwood didn't start, but you have to rely on him at the moment. He's such an outstanding player that he has to play and he has to start, and that he'll come back in for this game. I'm sure of it. Obviously, coming in to off a good win at Luton in the cup, which I think will help them. But the Premier League, they can't afford to drop more points in the Premier League. I say so early on, but against the Brighton side, who obviously it's strange because they're going to play each other again next week, aren't they? In the cup, obviously in the EFL Cup again. So it's back-to-back games against Brighton and Brighton coming in, really good form. Didn't they? Won their last 3. Obviously lost against Chelsea and played quite well, didn't they? In the first Premier League game of the season, won their last 3, obviously 2 in the cup, but beat Newcastle 3-0 last time out, which was really, really impressive. It's going to be a really tough game for United. And team selection, like I say, for United is going to be interesting. You expect Greenwood to come back in, obviously Wan-Bissaka, possibly Matic, obviously Van der Beek might be on the bench again. He might play. For me, I would play him, but he might be on the bench again. Huge game. I've just gone United here. I think they really need to win. I think they will. It's a tight game, but 2-1.
Yeah, this is a tough one to call for me. You naturally go for United, don't you, because of the history of the two clubs. But Brighton come into this in really good form. That win over Newcastle last weekend, neither of us saw that coming. Certainly not in that manner as well. 3-0 away to Newcastle, really impressive result. And as you say, they impressed against Chelsea as well. I've actually gone for a draw in this one. I've gone for 1-1. I think I agree with you. United really do need to get off the board quickly because their big goal this season was to close the gap on the top 2, wasn't it? And we know from the past 2 seasons that any drop points can be quite fatal in that goal because Liverpool and Man City can be so relentless when they get on a winning run. But yeah, I've gone for a 1-1 draw with this one. I think Brighton's a really tough game at the moment, especially away from home for Manchester United side who got off to such a disappointing start. Obviously, the fact that it was their first game of the season and Palace had a game before that did impact the result. And having 2 games under their belt now, you'd expect United to be a bit better this weekend. But yeah, I think this one on paper is a tougher one than Palace at home last weekend was, which they lost. So yeah, I'm going for a 1-1 draw in this one. Speaking of Palace, they're looking to back up that Manchester United victory against Everton. 2 teams who have won their opening 2 games of the season. Really positive start for both, particularly Everton, who have now, including the League Cup against Fleetwood in midweek, won back-to-back games 5-2. So they're scoring for fun. Dominic Calvert-Lewin in good form. James Rodriguez and the other new signings have fitted right in. Interesting game again between 2 teams full of confidence. I've actually gone for another Everton win in this one. Palace will fancy their chance of getting something from the game, particularly after that result against United last weekend. But I've gone for Everton 2-1 in this one.
Yeah, I was going to go Everton, but I just gone draw in the end. I've gone 1-1. I mean, you mentioned Everton, their goals at the moment, unbelievable, isn't it? But Palace don't score that many. But Palace were excellent against United last time out. Obviously got some defensive problems, haven't they? But yeah, we're fantastic going forwards. I think a big season for Zaha this season, isn't it? There's a lot of talk about him. Is he a 40 million pound player? Is he a 60, 70 million player? That obviously Arsenal have looked at him in the past, and Everton as well, strangely enough. But big season for him and Everton. Yeah, I think they're always going to concede goals. Jordan Pickford's form for me has been patchy for. It certainly was last season, back end of the season before as well. Obviously, start of this season as well against Fleetwood. Obviously, a couple of mistakes and stuff, and they're going to concede goals. I think this season, Everton, but they're going to be good fun to watch because they've got some great players going forward. I've got a draw in this one. It's one of those games. I mean, so much is happening at the moment, isn't it? With goals flying in everywhere. But I think there's a 1-1 in here somewhere. Just looking through my predictions, I've gone 1-1, a couple of others as well. But I'm going to go 1-1 here.
Yeah, I've got a few 1-0s as well, so probably gone the same on a few of them.
Yeah.
Okay, 1-0 for Matt in Crystal Palace, Everton. Also on Saturday is West Brom versus Chelsea. West Brom have got off to a really difficult start to the season, haven't they? Back in the Premier League, but they've conceded 8 goals in their 2 games, 3-0 defeat to Leicester on the opening day, 5-2 against Everton last time out in the Premier League. Whereas Chelsea, they were beaten by Liverpool after being reduced to 10 men last weekend, but opened the season with a 3-1 win against Brighton. Kai Havertz was in hat-trick form in midweek against Barnsley. How do you see this one go, Matt?
Yeah, I think that's really important for him, isn't it? Obviously, in the cup to get a hat trick, is in any game, obviously for your new club. Because there's a little bit of early criticism, wasn't there, of his form, his position in the team. Havertz has been a bit strange, a bit wide, but getting a hat trick against Barnsley is obviously going to help him. I thought Chelsea did okay against Liverpool last time, but I just thought Liverpool in the second half, as soon as Thiago come on, obviously you have your opinion on that, but I thought they were excellent in the second half. So. Chelsea, I don't think they're still quite there in terms of winning the league. I think they'll be looking to, can they break up City and Liverpool? Can they finish third? I would say probably around third this season for Chelsea. I don't think they're quite there in terms of winning the league, but I think they'll win this game. West Brom worry me this season. I think they've got a lot of players that are really good Championship players. They've got players like, obviously, Pereira had a great season last season for them. Obviously, assists here, there and everywhere. And it's played quite well at the start of this season. But I still think they're short in terms of, really Premier League quality. And, I'm struggling to see really anything other than a away win here. I've gone 3-1 Chelsea.
Yeah, I've got 2-0 Chelsea in this one. I agree with you with West Brom. I think they did show a couple of good attacking signs going forward against Everton. But, defensively, to conceded 8 goals. And I agree, I worry with them. I've tipped them for relegation. And nothing so far this season has made me change that. With Chelsea, I think the Liverpool result was a reality check, really. A lot of people were tipping them for the Premier League for a title challenge after their really good business they did. And obviously, a lot of those signings are still yet to come in. We need to say that. But it was just, I think, even 11 versus 11, Liverpool were by far the dominant team, just waiting for the breakthrough, which came obviously with the red card. So I think that was a little bit of a reality check for them. But yeah, like you, I'm backing them to win by 2 goals in this one, so I'm going for 2-0. The final game on Saturday is Burnley versus Southampton. How do you see that one going, Matt?
Yeah, this was the interesting one for me. Looking at two sides. I mean, we talk about Southampton quite a lot, don't we? Their away form, obviously, last season was really good, and they're a really good away team in the Premier League. But this season, they've really struggled, haven't they, for form at the start? We mentioned obviously fitness problems early on. They're not quite there in terms of their energy, the way they play, obviously under Ralph Hasenhüttl. But they've lost the last 3 now, all competitions. 5-2 against Tottenham. The Tottenham game was a bizarre one. I think you backed to draw in that one, didn't you? I thought I'd just put in up at Tottenham. But it was a weird game because I think there are going to be games like this early on. Would it be a 5-2 if there was a packed St Mary's? And, there's a lot of ifs and buts at the moment. There's going to be some strange results. But yeah, they're obviously got Danny Ings, who for me is, one of the best strikers in the Premier League, without a doubt. And I think they're going to be okay in terms of, I don't think they're going to be pulled into any sort of trouble this season, but I do think they really need a win after 3 straight defeats, obviously one in the Cup as well. It's not the end of the world really going out of the League Cup for Southampton. But Burnley, on the other hand, they're a solid team, but again, they're another one that, things could go wrong quite quickly. They could lose a few, and obviously it looks like they're going to keep Tarkowski. Obviously West Ham have had a little look at him, but it's probably going to be too expensive. And if they can keep Tarkowski, he's such a big player for them at the back. But probably going to make a couple more signings as well before the end of the window. But Burnley, not too sure about them this season. I've gone Southampton here, 2-0.
2-0 Southampton. I think Burnley, they need new signings, don't they? They've got a lot of players already out injured from the start of the season, which doesn't help things. Obviously, 4-2 losers against Leicester in their first game last weekend, and Southampton big losers, as you mentioned, against Tottenham. Really interesting match this one. Southampton, obviously, last season, it was their away record which saved them, but then on the opening day of the season, they lose away to Crystal Palace, which was a really disappointing result for them. So I'm struggling to separate them, to be honest. I've gone for a 1-1 draw in this one. One of my 1-0s. Couldn't separate them. I think 2 teams in poor form in the league. Burnley, obviously, through in the League Cup. But I think both teams will be desperate to get off the mark for a point at least. And I can see them getting a point apiece there. Sunday is a Yorkshire derby, kicks off. Sheffield United versus Leeds United. Leeds, say what you like about them, they've been entertaining so far, haven't they? 2-4-3 wins so far. 1 on the wrong end against Liverpool, 1 on the right end against Fulham, whereas Sheffield United they would have been really disappointed with their start to the season. 2-0 defeat to Wolves on the opening day, and then a 1-0 loss at Aston Villa last weekend. We said it would be a struggle for Sheffield United to replicate what they did last season. It looks like that might prove to be the case. A home match against a newly promoted side, they'd fancy their chances of maybe getting off the mark finally. But as we've seen from Leeds so far, they've been really impressive. They caused Liverpool all sorts of problems. Went 4-1 up against Fulham before letting them back into the game. Leeds obviously got the problems they need to fix in terms of defensively, but I think, I don't think they're going to be playing every game as 4-3s. They're going to tighten up at the back. Bielsa's going to have his way with them, and obviously they've signed Diego Llorente since that match, which should help to tighten things up as well. It's another one I couldn't really separate them on. I wouldn't be surprised to see either win this one. I think Leeds, a lot of people will fancy Leeds going into this given what's happened over the last 2 games, but again, I've gone for a 1-1 draw in this one.
Yeah, I thought it would be one of your 1-1s. It's one of mine 1-1s as well. You fancy that these big scoring games will settle down, won't they, as the season, as the weeks go by? Because early on, there's always going to be, so different, isn't it, at the start of this season to any other, obviously in history, or certainly obviously that we know about, or over, the modern day Premier League. So it's going to be, I think it's going to settle down the games. I would be surprised if there were 5s and 6s and 5-2s and stuff like that as the weeks go on. Obviously, it's going to be the odd one here and there. But I fancy a draw here. I think Leeds are going to be good fun to watch this season. Obviously, Llorente, for me, is a fantastic signing for them at the back. He's a classy defender. And I think they've made some good signings this summer, Leeds. Sheffield United, obviously doing their best to bring quite a few players in. Whether they're at the required standard is, a bit debatable for me, to be honest. And, Sheffield United now, you're just looking back. I mean, they've lost the last 5 in the Premier League now, dating back to actually that 3-0 win over Chelsea in July, and so losing 2 at the start of this season. The one against Villa was a big one, because with respect to Villa, you need to be beating teams like that, or at least not losing if you're going to really... I mean, what would be a good season for Sheffield United? If they finished 10th, I think that'd be unbelievable for them. But you really do fear that they might, get themselves locked in a battle, especially they play Arsenal next after this one. So if they would get a poor result here and then go to Arsenal, you could easily lose 4 at the start of the season, which is not ideal. But yeah, gone same as you, 1-1.
1-1 for Matt in that one. Okay, also on Sunday is Tottenham versus Newcastle. Tottenham have bounced back from their opening day defeat at home to Everton with 3 straight wins. We've mentioned that 5-2 over Southampton when Harry Kane and Son were in great form. Son 4 goals, Harry Kane 1 and 4 assists. Their 2 Europa League wins either side of that haven't been entirely convincing, but they've gone through in both of them away from home. Obviously, those travels could have an impact. They went to Macedonia on Thursday night, so that could have an impact on the game against Newcastle. Newcastle, speaking of bouncing back, beaten at home, as we mentioned, 3-0 by Brighton, which is a poor result for them, but then bounce back in the best way possible with a 7-0 win away to Morecambe in the League Cup. Matt, how do you see this one going?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one for, obviously, on this game. We talk about the Tottenham. It's not ideal, is it, making that trip, and like you say, their Europa League games this season have been, they've needed really late goals, haven't they? And they've been strange games, really, and it's not really... I suppose Mourinho would look at it, the fact that the Leyton Orient game got called off, obviously will help them a little bit, because obviously they were due to play Tuesday, Thursday, weren't they? And then obviously this game, which is a lot of football. I know they want games, probably some of the players at this stage of the season, but that's a lot of football to play. The fact they didn't play Tuesday in the end, this game getting called off. So it's a big one. Obviously, Son for me, everyone talks about Harry Kane, and he obviously, Harry Kane's an unbelievable player, but Son he's unbelievable, isn't he, in terms of what he brings. He's such an honest player, isn't he? And you can tell that obviously there's no real massive ego. You talk about how big a star he is, and obviously in his home country and how good he is in the Premier League. And yeah, he's a fantastic signing. So Tottenham this season, obviously the signings they've made in the market, I was a little bit fearful of what they might do, especially losing their first game, but putting 5 past Southampton last time out. Obviously won their last 3 now in all competitions. So I do expect Tottenham to win this game as well, to be honest. Games like this, I think last season have proved a little bit, tricky for them. Newcastle obviously have got players in the final third. Joe Linton obviously got a couple in the cup, which will really, really help him, because you fancy, watch him last season. He is a good player. Just didn't really fall for him in terms of, obviously Callum Wilson coming in will give him some competition in the final third. But yeah, struggling to see about Tottenham here. So I've gone 3-1 Tottenham.
Yeah, I've got exactly the same, to be honest. I think it's the type of game which suits Tottenham, and they had a really good home record last season.
Yeah.
Obviously, the defeat to Everton on the opening day undermined that a little bit this season so far, but I expect them to carry on their winning run with another 3-1 win. They're struggling to keep clean sheets at the moment, so I can see Newcastle scoring, especially if their attackers are growing in a bit of confidence, which they needed to do after last season. But yeah, exactly the same for me there, 3-1. Manchester City opened their campaign with a win against Wolves last time out, which was a really impressive win at Wolves against the team that beat them home and away last season. They host Leicester, so it's another difficult game for them on Sunday. How do you see that one going, Matt?
Yeah, I think City, we spoke about it before, didn't we? Wolves were probably a little bit disappointing. You obviously have to credit City for that. I thought they were excellent, to be honest. Wasn't really sure what to expect, because obviously they come in a week later and obviously had already 6 points behind Liverpool, obviously really early on and two games fewer at that stage. But I thought they were excellent in that game. De Bruyne was fantastic. And as soon as he stepped up for that penalty, obviously a key moment in the game, you never really thought he'd miss. Some players you just don't think they're going to miss there. And he's one of them, even though that City have missed some penalties last season. But yeah, good, excellent win. Leicester, on the other hand, like you mentioned, yeah, they've been fantastic this season. Played some really good stuff. Obviously lost to Arsenal in the League Cup, but not really draw too much into that. Scored 4 against Burnley and 3 against West Brom so far. 7 goals in 2 games. Can't really argue with that. And they've got some big players back. Obviously lost Chilwell this summer, but being a little bit active in the market, and whether they bring in some more new players, looks like it will be the case late on. But yeah, it's going to be a tight game, I think. City really probably do need to win these type of games this season. Obviously, last season, City obviously finished second, but they were nowhere near Liverpool, were they, for long stages, and they need to win games like this if they're gonna win the league this season. I think they will. So I've gone 2-1 City.
Yeah, I've also gone for Man City win. It is going to be a tough game. You mentioned Leicester made a really bright start to the season, and obviously last season, the first half of the season, they even outperformed Man City.
Yeah.
They were so good. So if they can carry on that type of form again this time around, and then get anywhere close to that in the second half of the season, which they didn't do last term, then again they'll be pushing for Champions League. But I think Man City at the moment, they'll be desperate to close that gap on Liverpool, and they'll know that almost every game is already a must-win game because of the standard Liverpool and Man City set. Until you can see one of them dipping under that standard, they've got to go into every game, even the second game of the season, as if it's a must-win game, because drop points can prove so crucial for the standard we're playing at the moment in the Premier League. So yeah, I've gone for 2-0 to Man City in that one. So both going for home wins. Rounding off Sunday's action is West Ham versus Wolves. We just mentioned Wolves obviously losing to Man City last weekend. West Ham were 5-1 winners against Hull in midweek, but still looking for their first Premier League point of the season. They fell to that really disappointing opening day defeat at home to Newcastle, but then were much better against Arsenal, weren't they, despite falling to that late defeat. They need to get off the mark quickly, and a home game, they'll fancy themselves in any home game, especially without the fans maybe getting on their backs like they do when they are there. But Wolves, even though they lost to Man City and were disappointing in the first half in particular, they had chances in that second half against Man City, Wolves did, and could have potentially got something out that game if they took a few of those chances. Raul Jimenez missed a glorious one, didn't he, putting it wide of the post. So if they're as clinical as usual, Jimenez doesn't usually miss those chances. If they're as clinical as usual, you'd fancy their chance of getting something out of this game. West Ham need to get off the mark sooner rather than later, but their run of fixtures is so difficult. I don't expect it to be as disappointing as the Newcastle result was, because they were much improved against Arsenal. And I can see them putting up a fight against many of the teams they got coming up in this difficult run. But for me, I'm just backing Wolves. I can see them edging this one 2-1.
Yeah, I've gone 2-2 here actually. I think Wolves' performance in the first half against City maybe changed my mind a little bit. I'm not sure really what they're going to achieve this season. Obviously, they're going to be hoping to push towards that, obviously, top 6. But for me, this type of game, West Ham, the strange thing for West Ham at the moment, you look at their team in midweek, obviously, Haller, Yarmolenko, Lanzini, Anderson all playing in their second string team at the moment, which is ridiculous. Not ridiculous, but you know what I mean, in terms of obviously they're behind the likes of Antonio, Bowen, Pablo Fornals in terms of that front three. It probably will be the same sort of team from the Arsenal game. And I thought West Ham were really unfortunate in that game. They did well to come back, didn't they? And obviously there was a dodgy VAR call in there straight after the United game. The one where Gabriel handled it in the box, exactly the same as Lindelof for the United game, but that didn't get given, and that got given. But that's a chat for another day. But yeah, Wolves, I'm going to be interested to see them this season, purely because they've got such a lot of good players, made some good signings, but where are they really going to go this season? I'm not sure how high they're going to be able to push up. And I do think West Ham will get a point here, to be honest. I think they played well at Arsenal. The result midweek will help them. They've got players in good form. Obviously, those players are going to probably revert to the bench, but they've got a lot of firepower in reserve. So very interesting. But I'm on 2-2 here.
2-2 for Matt, okay. As is the custom nowadays, we've got 2 games on Monday night. Fulham versus Aston Villa is the first of those. Aston Villa have made a really bright start to the season, through in the EFL Cup with 2 wins from 2. A win against Sheffield United in their first Premier League game last weekend. So they'll be full of confidence against the Fulham side, which is still looking for their first Premier League point. They've conceded 7 goals in their 2 Premier League games so far. They're through, like Aston Villa are, in the League Cup, but 4-3 losers against Leeds United last time out. How do you see this one going, Matt?
Yeah, it's a big game for Fulham, this one. Look at Fulham, obviously you mentioned this season conceded a lot of goals. The game against Leeds last time out was good value in terms of entertainment, but it leaves them pointless. And for me, you look at their two after this one, they play away at Wolves and away at Sheffield United after this game. And obviously Sheffield United have not been great, but going to Bramall Lane is still, a really, really difficult test. And if Fulham were to get beat here, and they lose the next couple, it puts a lot of pressure on them. They play Palace and West Brom before the end of the month. They're obviously two huge games in terms of their fight against survival. But you can easily get pulled down to the bottom of the table if they were to lose their first 5 or 6. It's no good for confidence. It's not even just about the points for me. It's what that does to your confidence, because obviously Fulham have been there before. They've really struggled and they don't want to go straight back down. They need to stay up, don't they? They've obviously got a good team there, obviously a good young manager who, for me, a lot of people will be looking at and watching to see how he does moving forward, because obviously he's did brilliantly to get him up last season. But yeah, Villa very encouraging signs this season. I think you can see a pattern the way they're playing. Obviously made some good signings, and you can just see what they're trying to do now, which I think for last season there were stages where you weren't really sure how they were trying to play because they were so intent on surviving in the Premier League. They couldn't really come up with any sort of pattern of play. But I do see signs of Villa that I like this season. But I just fancy a draw here because I think Fulham really can't get beat, and I don't think they will. So I've gone 1-1.
1-0 for Matt. Yeah, I think with Villa, I think when I did my season previews, I predicted them maybe to go down, but the signings they've made since then have changed my mind. Bertrand Traore obviously scored a great goal on his debut against Bristol City in the EFL Cup. I think the signings they've made, in addition to keeping Grealish and signing him onto a new contract, Tyrone Mings has signed a new long-term contract. There's a feel-good factor about that club now, and they'll certainly be confident of performing better than they did last season. They won't fancy themselves needing a great escape at the end of the season to stay up. So I've actually gone for them to win this one. Fulham haven't made a convincing start to the season. They showed fight in that fight back against Leeds, but obviously ultimately fell short. So I can see Villa scraping this one 1-0, which would be a big result for them and a really disappointing result for Fulham, because these are the types of games which they really need to be winning if they're to stay in the division, I think. Rounding off the game week's action is Liverpool versus Arsenal. Liverpool 2 wins from 2 so far. It's a huge game, this one. They've scored 7 past Lincoln in midweek with an entirely changed team. Obviously beat Chelsea. I think they entirely outclassed Chelsea, even 11 versus 11, as I mentioned earlier in that game. So that was, and it was a much more solid performance than it was against Leeds United. I think the Leeds game raised a lot of concerns about the defensive issues there still were, but Fabinho going back to centre-back for the Chelsea game, and he dealt with Werner really well, which proved that there's a bit of depth there even without Gomez or Matip, and he actually performed much better than Gomez did against Leeds on the opening day. So that'll be encouraging for Liverpool fans who had concerns about the 4-3 win over Leeds, to have beaten a team many expected to be title rivals so comfortably at Stamford Bridge. Stamford Bridge is never an easy place to go, even after Chelsea go down to 10 men, it's never an easy game. And you mentioned Thiago earlier, the encouraging signs of him on his Liverpool debut. That will really excite fans. Arsenal, on the other hand, they've made a really bright start to the season as well, haven't they? Beating Fulham 3-0, beating West Ham 2-1. A little bit fortunate, as you mentioned earlier, with that VAR call in the latter game, and needed a late goal from Eddie Nketiah. And then beating Leicester in midweek as well in the EFL Cup. So 3 wins from them. And obviously they beat Liverpool on penalties in the Community Shield at the very start of the season, didn't they? So they'll take plenty of confidence going into this match. But a trip to Anfield is as hard as it gets in English football right now. Liverpool have got such a good record at home. And they tend to score a lot of goals against Arsenal too, especially at Anfield. So I've gone for a bit of a high scoring one here. I've gone for 4-2 to Liverpool.
4-2. Wow. Yeah. If you get that right, to be fair, you deserve to win the competition outright, predicting a 4-2. But yeah, I've also gone Liverpool. I've gone 3-1. I do fancy goals. I think the next few weeks will be a good metric to see where Arsenal are, what kind of team they are this season. Because they play Liverpool, they play City, Leicester and United before the end of October. And that's a tough run of games. But if they were to come through that period with, a really good points return, you'd fancy, can they push back into the top 4 this season? Obviously, I'm not saying they're anywhere near title challenges or anything like that, but can they finish 4th this season? Maybe. I think that's the talking point for Arsenal. Are they capable of doing that? Obviously, some good early signs, but West Ham gave them a really good game last time out. And Liverpool, I was maybe a little bit disrespectful of Liverpool early this season. I think the performance against Chelsea was, obviously it pains me to say, but just so comfortable, wasn't it? You're talking about a side that never really looked in any sort of danger. Obviously, the red card helped them. I'm not saying it wasn't a red card, because it was a red card, and obviously second half they were really good and made the best signing for me of the summer with Thiago. Obviously, Jota is a good player. Obviously, not going to be in the first 11, but Thiago for me is just ridiculous signing for them at that price. So I fancy Liverpool to win here, to be honest, and it's going to be very interesting to see how Arsenal cope with, where they're not going to have a lot of the ball. They're obviously going to be under pressure. They're going to be really, have a real good test, obviously, and early on that you'd expect Arsenal to beat Fulham and West Ham, with respect those sort of games. But these are the type of games where you're going to find out a lot about what type of team they're going to be this season. But yeah, same as you, not quite as high scoring, but 3-1 Liverpool.
3-1 Liverpool. So we're both going for Liverpool wins to round out the game week. We have previews for all of them over on sportsmore.co.uk, as well as many other games from the Championship and across Europe. So please be sure to check in for that. You can subscribe to this on YouTube or on the usual podcast channels that we've been on for a while. So please be sure to do that. We'll be back, Matt and I, next week for our next round of predictions. So be sure to check in for that too. Thanks for joining us.